Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson.
Welcome, badasses. Again, I feel like every single time I say I'm super excited, but I'm always super excited. And I'm going to let you know why, because my guest today has a really neat story. And I was in a group actually on Facebook, and she mentioned a little bit of her story. And I reached out. I'm like, I need to know more about your journey, your story. And if I felt that way, then I know that you all are going to feel the same way. So I am really excited about my guest today. And my guest today is Christy Holt. She is a self-proclaimed happiness hussy, adventure guide, podcast host of Create Your Happy, and international best-selling author on a mission to spread happiness around the planet. Christy is a mentor for the whole ass human. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you so much for reaching out and for having me on your show. I'm so grateful that people are also out there creating platforms for stories to be told, because I truly believe that inside of our stories is a permission slip for others, a recognition that they're not alone, and potentially a way to see things a little differently than they might be seeing them right now. So thank you for creating this platform. And yeah, I hope all you badasses out there are going to get a little something out of I'm sure was going to be a very juicy conversation today.
Yes, I like that, juicy. Yeah. So one, like the happiness hussy, that makes me happy because I feel like there is an extreme shortage of happiness in the world, like extreme shortage. It's something that I don't think people actually, until they hit a certain age, which tends to be after what you would think of as their retirement age, do people actually consider, oh, now I can do things that make me happy. But if you think about what that age is, what you have like 10 years of happiness. And then, I mean, I've worked in the fitness industry for a long time. And that's usually when your health, if you haven't been taking care of yourself, starts declining. And then you're not happy when you actually like feel like trash.
Yeah, the irony of waiting to be happy later, and whether that's at retirement or next week or next month, you're going to keep waiting, right? Because the reality is, first of all, happiness is your intended state of being. You can feel happy. I'm going to be really bold here and say that since it's your intended state of being, you can feel happy nearly all of the time. It's the other stuff that gets in your way that prevents you from feeling that base state of happiness. And maybe you don't resonate so much with the word happy. Maybe you feel more like peace is what feels best to you, or joy or love or freedom, whatever that really, really fucking good feeling is within you. It's your intended state of being. It's your natural state. And so when we wait and put that off, we're actually missing that it's there all along. And I think, the reason why people wait is because we've been conditioned to believe for our lives long that we have to do something or, create something or go get and have something in order to feel happy. And that's bullshit. That's actually keeping you so distracted from the inner state that is your happiness, your peace, your love, your joy, so that you're not actually experiencing it now, which is the only time that you have to create that experience for yourself.
I like that word distracted, because that truly at the essence, the base level of it, we are distracted by the images, achieve this, these things are what's important. And oftentimes people don't even consider what actually makes me happy and how can I go about creating that. And it's distractions.
Yeah. And we've been taught to seek it outside of ourselves for so long that we are constantly chasing the next thing that we think is going to bring us this happiness. And then what we end up doing is we keep realizing, oh, like I have that thing and I was happy for a minute, but now I'm feeling still, well, there's still something missing. So it's on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And we never feel fulfilled. And the reason we don't feel fulfilled is because we're looking in the wrong fucking places, right? We are looking out there for what we can only truly source from within. And so everything out there is a very, very compelling illusion, but a distraction from the truth that we have all that we actually want and desire within us. We don't need to do anything out there. We don't need to chase it. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be quote unquote good enough by the way you already are, all of those things, right? You don't actually have to go out and prove it to anybody else. You already are. You're worthy. You're good enough. You're perfect as you are. And all of that hustling is getting in the way of you actually experiencing what you truly want.
Oh, hell yeah. So you've had quite the journey. You've had some struggles and you have made happiness your mission. Tell us about your journey to happiness.
Where do I even start today? I'm going to start, I guess, with my second marriage. And I will leave that open because now you know there was a first marriage, and that's a whole story for another day. But yeah, in my second marriage, I had 3 children, and I found myself suffering from what I lovingly now refer to just a momitis, which is essentially to say I didn't know who the fuck I was. I was just a mom. You know, I was in other parents' phones as so-and-so's mom. Anybody else? Like, they don't even know my name. I'm just my child's mom. And so I suffered from this massive, like, loss of identity. And I was a wife and a mother and a homemaker. And beyond that, I was like, well, like, who is Christy? I don't know. I felt really lost. My relationship was, we'll say, not a great fit. We were very, very different people. We really struggled with communication from the get-go. And I'm someone who sees the possibility and the best in people, which is fantastic, unless I'm abandoning myself to do so, which I did for a number of years. And so I could see the potential. I could see where it could go. And I was ignoring the reality that it absolutely wasn't going any of those places. And I was kind of living in dreamland. I had been sucked in by the conditioning to people please, to try and make other people happy, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to hold it all together and appear strong, to chase perfection so that I could prove that I was good enough and worthy of having the things that I wanted to have. And like I said earlier, it was all a distraction and none of it was the truth. And so I had put all of this energy into all of these things and it wasn't working. So of course, naturally, I got frustrated. I got really resentful. I was really bitter and I was really unhappy in my relationship because things weren't going well there. I was really stressed out and anxious and overwhelmed because I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do. And I knew I had this, I look back and I call it being stuck. And that's actually the name of my first book, is Unstuck for Women. Because when I was here, I was in this very stuck place. It was anxiety. It was overwhelm. It was overthinking. It was not knowing who I was. And it was this call, like there was something more calling me. Like I didn't totally know what. I was totally in the dark. I just knew like there's a tension within me that's saying like, this is not it. Right here, what you've got going on, not it. There is something better. And whether you want to call that like, you know, a voice from God or just my inner knowing or just my hopes and dreams and my soul speaking up, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. There was a call to something different. And so that's when I talk about being stuck, it's like referring to this tension of where you are and where you wish you could be. And the gap is not as big as you think, in fact, because it's just a lot of distraction generally keeping you from the state of being that you're actually seeking. It's not out there in some distant future. It's available to you now if you look in the right places. So here I am in this marriage. It's not going well. It's like constantly walking on eggshells, and try as I might, there is just no happiness coming out of this fellow. Okay. So I realize after, I'm going to just say years, I spent waiting, hoping, wishing, complaining, blaming him, and waiting around for him to change, or I don't know, someone to come and fucking save me like a knight in shining armor. And it didn't happen. And so I had this like aha moment where I realized like, holy shit, it's me. I'm the one, I'm the common denominator. Every last one of my problems, guess who's there? And it's easy for us to look at those situations, as we often do. We look back and say, oh, I could have done that better. I should have done this differently. And it's easy to blame ourselves. But the truth is, when we made that decision, we were making the decision with the information, the resources and understanding that we had at that time. And so it doesn't serve us to look back on that time with additional information and beat ourselves up. And so I realized I could have done this better, not to beat myself up, but to empower myself to do it better from here on, right? And not guilt and shame, but compassion and understanding and wisdom gleaned from that past learning that I could now take forward to do things differently. And so I started to work on myself. I stopped pointing the fingers at him and I started looking at myself. And so I had to take what I call radical responsibility for myself and choose how I wanted to show up. What was the life I wanted to create? And not like in some imaginary distant future, but how did I want to feel today, right now? And when I started to do that, I started to really evolve and grow. And it came from this place of wholeness, not like I'm broken and I need fixing and I have to, do better and be better all the time. But this place of like, what if I'm already whole? What if I'm already worthy? What if I'm already good enough? Like, how would I go out and create my life? What would I be free to experience right here and right now? And as I started to do life that way, well, my ex-husband and I sort of drifted further and further apart, as it sometimes happens when things are just not in alignment. And so I made the most difficult decision of my entire life. And that was to choose myself. I had thought I was protecting my kids by keeping the family together, by, keeping my commitment to my marriage, until I realized that what I was showing them was the opposite of what I had ever wanted for them to have for themselves. I would be terrified when I thought about, like, what if my kids grow up and have a relationship just like this? What if they take this and see that this is just what normal is? And so I made the really difficult decision. I chose to leave. It was scary as fuck. Like, the uncertainty, the unknown, the will I be okay? How will I have financially, emotionally? How will my children fit? Like, there were so many unknowns. And that's probably why I stayed so long, if I'm really honest. But eventually, it just wasn't worth it to stay anymore. I was losing myself even more, if that was possible, because I didn't know who I was. But as I started to discover who I was through this process of sort of radical responsibility and looking at myself with compassionate inquiry, I started to realize I deserved something more than that. And so I chose myself. And I'll be honest, it was terrifying. It was probably the darkest period of my life, going through that divorce. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I have been accused of promoting divorce by obviously bitter people who don't want me to suggest that their wife divorced them, maybe. I don't know. But I don't promote anything unless it's what's best for you. And the truth is, you're the only one who knows what's best for you.
I want to highlight something you said, because you said, I didn't look back with sort of that shame and guilt. I looked back with compassion, I think is the word that you used. And that's something I see so often with women, is they beat themselves up for making certain decisions, or, living out of a line, whatever you want to call it. And they made the choices with the information that they had, and to waste so much energy, and you get yourself even more stuck when you're just sitting there beating yourself up, when really it's like, okay, that happened. I did what I did. There's nothing I can do about it. And now I have to move forward. I have new information to make new decisions. I work with people, health coaching and things like that. And I hear they tried this and it didn't work, and then they beat themselves up. And it's like, well, you did what you did with the information that you had. Now you have new information. Let's go out and make new decisions. But living in that shame and that guilt gets you nowhere but more stuck.
Yeah, it's a miserable place to be. And, to be honest, no one chooses it. It's not like you're like, I'm going to just go make myself feel like shit today. It's an automatic response. It's actually trying to protect you. It's a protective mechanism that ultimately probably protected you at one point in time, but is no longer serving you now. And just this simple shift in perspective, like, hey, you didn't know any better. Like, if this was your child that is learning and growing and didn't know any better, would you guilt and shame them for making a mistake? I would suspect not.
It truly makes my heart hurt when I listen to the stories of women where they can't get past that, and it could be 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they still hold it up as a measurement tool that was a failure and that shame lives inside them. So sharing that message, I think you and I didn't know this prior, but we have very similar stories of the life that we had and then the life that we have now created. And I don't know how I made it to this place in life. And that's something that I don't suffer from. I really have the firm belief of that happened. It's over. Move on now. And that is something, you talk about your children. That's something that I've tried to really instill in my children is even when you make mistakes, making yourself feel shameful. And we've talked about the mistakes I've made, age appropriate, obviously, but just letting them there's nothing, I can't go back. I can only go forward. So let's not sit in that shame.
It's funny. I talked with my oldest son. We have my partner and I, which now I'm giving you even more teasers. It all turned out better than possible. I had my 3 kids. I also have a bonus son now. We have 4 teenage boys between us. And I had a conversation not that long ago with my oldest, who's 17. He was probably 16 at the time, about motivation and how shame and beating ourselves up works. And I put that works in quotes because it clearly doesn't work. But so many people are convinced that it does. They think that if they just, beat themselves into submission, that they'll feel motivated to go and change. And it baffles me because the results prove time and time and time and time again that if it works at all, you still feel like shit. So is that really working? Is that what you want for your life, is to maybe have a little bit of progress, but feel like a heap of junk the whole time? I'm here to tell you there's a different way to do this, and it feels so much better. You get to feel good while you're growing. And this is because you're human. You're complex. You are, here having this experience, and you get to choose. And the people out there that are going to be like, well, you aren't living my life, and you don't know that I don't have choices. And I get it, because I've been there and I felt that place where I didn't have any choices. And the reason that you can't see the choices, I promise you that they are there. But the reason you can't see them is because you're in survival mode, right? You're not functioning. Your brain is actually literally just zoned in on surviving, which it's dramatic. So it's just don't die, right? All the other stuff, all the critical thinking, the logical and the creative ideas and the, full expression of yourself and your hopes and your dreams are on power save mode, while your brain is focused on just don't die. And so you don't see the infinite possibilities and the immense amount of choice that's actually available to you. And I can say this now because I've been in those shoes and I'm now in these shoes, and I can see things from 2 perspectives. Actually, I just wrote a post the other day about one of my gifts is to be able to see so many different perspectives. I don't just see the one that I have from my personal experience, but I can understand and see someone who sees it completely differently, which is very interesting to navigate the world, because people go in and they say, oh, you think this way? And then they think we're having a disagreement. And I'm like, oh no, I totally see what you're saying too. And they're like, wait, what?
You don't want to go toe to toe here?
Yeah. They're like, but you said, I'm like, yeah, that's how I see it, but you can see it differently. And that's the beauty of this whole human experience. We can learn through seeing all kinds of different things. And there are 8.1 billion and counting different perspectives on this planet. So why not be open to seeing a little bit more than the black and white one that you have been seeing? I know I'm oversimplifying, because if you're really stuck, you just don't even see a way out, right?
I think one of the biggest disservices people do for themselves is they think, oh, this is only me. This is only something that I carry. Nobody else would understand. Nobody else is going through this. And so they keep it to themselves, and then they have that stuck just continually. There's no getting out of it. But as soon as you bring light to that, as soon as you take that flashlight and turn it on, the shame starts to dissipate and you start to have different options. But it's keeping it inside of you that festers and grows, and then you're unable to get out of that stuckness.
Yeah. And it's so easy to catastrophize. And when we talk about this stuckness, it doesn't have to be your whole life is in shambles kind of stuckness. It can be you're just not sure what next step to take in your business. It could be you're just not sure if this person that you're dating is quote unquote the one, right? It can be a tiny little stuckness where you're just not sure. You're unclear. You don't see too many options, or you just feel like you might make a mistake if you choose anything. So you stay stuck in analysis paralysis. And so if you're finding yourself stagnant in some way, and feeling just a little bit like that tension, like maybe there's something more, maybe it's my next level that's calling me, then this conversation will still apply to you, even if you're not like, low in the dredges of a nasty high conflict divorce. Maybe that's not your story.
Yeah. You don't have to be in a puddle. I like how you talk about the sort of that tension, because that's what yes, it applies to everything. I have a lot of women who are in a point where it's like, oh, they're starting to notice maybe friendships are, ooh, is this really what I want? Are these really, because it's maybe the focus of the friendship might be kind of toxic. They're starting to realize, oh, this doesn't feel good. That tension point, that's a voice inside of you. That's a voice saying, hey, it's time to listen. Something isn't right here. And then that's where the stuckness comes, because it's like, okay, but I have this information. It is so scary, because how do you're going to then, it's either you choose to stay, or you choose, I have to begin to evolve. I have to make new choices that are not the choices I'm making now, because that keeps me where I am. And that's where it gets a little scary. And that's where it gets so beautiful, because
absolutely
on the other side of the scary is where all the beautiful experiences happen, because that's when you're in alignment.
Absolutely. And it's terrifying, of course, when all you can think of is what you might lose. But so often when we're focused on what we might lose, we are not keeping our sights on what we can potentially gain. And if we can shift to what we can gain, when you start to see that if you just shift your focus, this is what you get to choose to do. You can just focus on one thing. And it's not about bypassing it, because you have to feel your emotions. But what it is about bypassing the stories and judgments and shame that don't serve you. Like, let's bypass that, allow our emotions to be our emotions, to feel them, to let them move through without like keeping ourselves weighed down by judging ourselves. That feels a lot better than this, like trying to fix what you think is broken and beating yourself up for still fucking being broken. You get to be magical and growing and expanding and living life and having all of the experiences that you want here and now, not in some future when you're magically, healed and become perfect.
Because that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
We're never going to get there. Yeah. I think that that perspective shift is it's so important, and it's actually so easy. It's sort of like that stuckness that we talked about, where you only see what's right in front of you and you're unable to see different ways of being. It's the same way with a perspective shift, that until you consider, like, what if I can be happy now? What if I'm not broken? What if I'm whole? And sometimes that feels bad for people to, they feel like that's kind of a selfish perspective, or there's this idea that I have to suffer. And what if you don't? And even just applying, you've said it many times, just that phrase, what if, ahead of anything. Like, what if it doesn't have to be the way that you are currently? What if? Like, that opens up the possibilities. Like, that is a perspective shift right there, versus kind of this closed, I'm in this box and there's no way out.
I like to very often invite people to try things on. And generally, it's the same as trying on clothes, but you're trying on a new perspective, a new idea, a new outlook, a new mindset, a new belief. And I'm not telling you that this is what it is, because you have to decide for yourself, and not all of my truths will be your truths. This isn't about, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all of the strategies, but you do. So I invite people to try on, what would it be like for me? Just try it on. What would it be like if I felt I was already whole and worthy? What if all of that conditioning that we have had growing up, going through school and being told that there is a right and a wrong answer, and that if we don't get the right one, that there's something wrong with us, and that if we're not like everybody else, or we stand out, or we stick out, or something like that, there's something wrong with us? What if all of those things that we learned about ourselves all the way growing through there, with all of that conditioning that actually serves to keep you stuck, what if that was all bullshit? What if the truth is you're an exceptional badass who is magical, who has everything that you need, that has all of the answers, that you don't need to seek anything more outside of yourself, but by coming into yourself, you can find everything that you've ever wanted? And you're right. It's really hard to do that alone. right? It's your inner journey, but it's hard to do it alone because you cannot fucking see with your eyeballs can't see. You need a mirror, right? And so just like that, in relationship with other people who can start to help you to see things differently, you can start to try on some new ideas. And by trying them on, you just get to see, does it fit? How does it feel? What difference is it going to make in my experience? And if it doesn't fit, you take it off and you try something else on. And it's okay if you need to take baby steps, right? Because sometimes people are just like, oh, just, start an affirmation that I'm a millionaire. Well, if you don't believe it, like now you're just bullshitting yourself. So you're not going to actually get anywhere. So I'm not suggesting you go from 0 to 100 and try and bullshit yourself into a different life. But you can say that I'm working on becoming a millionaire if that feels true for you. You can say I'm in the process of learning to love myself if that feels true for you, if you're taking some attempts even. You don't have to jump to I love myself because a lot of people will be like, man, I don't know. That doesn't feel true. So it's not to bullshit yourself. It's not to bypass. It's not to jump ahead. It's just to make those tiny perspective shifts because awareness is everything. And when you start to see, what if I actually did love myself? Now I'm playing with an idea. I'm just giving it a go. I'm trying it on, seeing how that would fit. And what would my life look like if I love myself? Well, I'd probably be happier. Okay. I'd probably suffer a lot less. Okay. Another win. As far as I look, I don't see a single downside to I love myself. Okay. Wait, I got one. Someone else might think I'm a selfish asshole. Because they've been conditioned to believe that it's selfish and wrong to love yourself. But is that true? Something else to try on, right? Other people's beliefs about you don't really hold any water if you know what's true about yourself. I tell my kids this a lot because, oh my gosh, they know how to get at each other's goat. So they'll be like, you're this. And they'll be like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, listen, if someone said, like, if I said to you, your blue hair is ridiculous, you'd be like, oh, someone behind me with blue hair, like who's she talking to? That's clearly not me. You wouldn't have a reaction. You'd just be like, well, okay, you're not talking to me. So I don't know. Maybe you need to get your eyes checked. I don't know. But we take offense and we sometimes get triggered when we think there could be some truth to it. And so invitation for those moments, if you're feeling emotional about something or something feels really sticky and difficult, it's actually an invitation to look within. What's coming up for you? This isn't actually to do with the other person at all. Even when we get activated and upset by things, it's actually just an opportunity. It's an invitation to explore ourselves more deeply. What is it bringing up in myself that I'm having this reaction? It's not about the other person. So again, when you're looking in the right place, not looking outward, but looking inward, you find all of the answers that you've been looking for. And then you find the peace, because when you resolve what's actually an issue within yourself, you set yourself free. Like it feels very simple to talk about, but I know how it's not that easy when you're trying to do it, which is why you need the support. You need the reminders. You need someone to help you, not like an accountability partner who's going to be like, did you go to the gym today? But someone who's going to lovingly remind you, like when you forget, because you're a human and you're going to forget, you're going to slip. That's the way your brain is wired. There's like these neural pathways, and it goes like the easy ruts. If you're used to trash talking yourself, or if you're used to whatever running dialogues that you have, it's a challenge to change them. But bring someone on board who can remind you how amazingly epic you are. Every time you forget is a total game changer. And my current partner is actually one of those people in my world. And yeah, I wasn't looking for a partner after I left my divorce. I was actually adamantly, forget this. Like, I'm not doing this again. I'm over it. 2 times, enough for me. I actually had 3 like long-term relationships. None of them turned out. I was like, I'm done. And then I met my current partner literally while running a marathon. And he was everything that.
Wait, I want the details on this.
Yeah.
I need some details. I've run a marathon before, and I did not.
You didn't meet the love of your life?
Did not. No. So because here, and this is what I find most interesting about just that little bit of the story, is when I talk with people who they actually want a relationship, and they are on these dating apps, and it's like, men holding fish and not appealing at all. And one of the things we talk about is like, what do you love doing? And you went out and we're doing, and I wanted cats. I joked like, I'm going to get cats. I'm never getting married again. Well, married again, 2 more children. But I was in the same, like, I have no interest in anything. I was just living, but it's a uncomfortable space for some people to be in. So just tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, most people stay in that chasing because they're afraid of the loneliness, right? And again, this is an unresolved issue within yourself. I say often, you don't actually have a love problem. You don't actually have a relationship problem. You have an identity problem because you've lost track of who you are. And if you solve that problem, you will solve those external problems, those things, all those things that cause you pain and suffering. You will solve them if you get to know who you truly are. And while I wasn't looking for a relationship, I did scroll the Tinder. Mama has some needs. Okay. So I was not hiding away, but I was very clear on what I wanted. And while I was in my marriage, I was working with a therapist. And at one point, she had me do this exercise. We created this list. And I'll tell you, it was a struggle because when I was in this relationship with my ex, and she was trying to have me put together this list of things that I actually desired in a healthy, loving relationship, I struggled because there was a big disconnect. That was not what my current husband was doing. And I had a really hard time putting anything on my list that I felt he couldn't do because I felt like I was like saying my marriage can't work if I was making this list. Thankfully, she helped me to kind of detach that from the whole thing and helped me to recognize I can still want things for myself. And this was a worthiness piece. And so anyways, I had this list and it was not he's tall, dark, and handsome, or he makes 6 figures or any bullshit like that. It was how I was going to feel in this relationship. It focused on things like we would laugh a lot, right? That he would always value what I had to say, even if he didn't agree, that we would disagree using peaceful methods, so that he would never speak poorly or disrespectfully to me, that we would go on adventures together, right? It was those kind of qualities. And how was I going to feel? I was going to feel at peace. I was going to feel happy. I was going to feel loved. I was not going to feel doubted. I was not going to feel unseen and unheard and like I had to be someone else. I wasn't going to feel like I had the burden of making someone else happy, because what I wanted was to find someone who was already happy and then I would come happy, and then we'd fucking magnify the shit out of our happiness by bringing that together. And that's what happened. I'm running a marathon. Literally, it was the weekend that my marital home, if you will, finally sold after like a ridiculous amount of time on the market, keeping us kind of stuck and trapped in this house, attempting to parent and live together. A weight lifted off my shoulders. It was this crazy, smoky, like apocalyptic looking weekend because the forest fires were just like infringing. The marathon almost didn't happen. And yet when I woke up that morning, the marathon was a go. I was like, let's fucking do this. Like, I've been training. This is my time. So I pull up at the like kind of last minute. I find my pace bunny or my pacer, depending if you have run races before, you might not know what that is. That's someone who runs a certain pace to get your race done in X amount of time. And so this was my 3rd marathon, and I had set my sights on a sub 4:15. Both of my previous marathons were around 4.5 hours. And I was like, I'm going to go big or go home. I'm shaving 15 minutes off. Roll up. There's the pace bunny. It's kind of cute. He's wearing this turtle, like hard shell kind of turtle backpack for a marathon. I'm thinking like, okay, like what are you doing? And at this particular race, it's run by like the running room. They have like pace bunny ears. So they have like bunny ears. So I'm like, oh, like it's kind of cute, right? And I'm not thinking about that at all until we get to like 30-kilometer mark, give or take. And anyone who's run a marathon knows that typically around 30K is when shit starts to hurt. Like maybe it hurts sooner, but by 30K, you're like, this is a mental game. The wheels are literally falling off the bus and I just have to hold it together just for 1 more hour of running, give or take, right? And so we're at like this 30K mark. There was probably like 30 or so people that started with us with this group of people aiming for 4:15. Everyone but one person had fallen back and the other person was lagging just behind. So it was me and this pace bunny. My knees are screaming at me. My mind is like, shut up, knees. Like, it's only 1 more hour. And so I'm having this internal battle. And I decide I need a distraction. And so I figured this guy is wearing a turtle backpack and bunny ears, is like running like he's out for a Sunday stroll. Okay. He's not breathing hard. He's not sweating, nothing. Like this is so easy walk in the park for him. And so I chatted him up because I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to ask him like short questions between my hard breathing. And hopefully he'll give me long answers so that I can be distracted while I'm not trying to die. So I get my mind off my pain. And so we just chatted. We talked about running. We talked about races that we'd done. We talked about, what we did for work and our families. And I found out a little bit about him, and I still had no expectations. I found out that he's 7 years younger than me. Again, no expectations. I wasn't looking for anyone. I really was not. And yet there was something. So I crushed my goal, to fast forward to the finish line. Crushed my goal is 4:10 something. I can't remember the second at this point. And I was so excited. And so when he crossed the finish line, which he did a little bit after me because he kind of held back to cheer the other, he's so like supportive that way, like held back to cheer the other people that were kind of in our group to get across the finish line close to their goal. And so I found him after it was over, and I was like, I am so grateful, right? I'm like, there's a beer garden. Let me take you for a drink. I need a picture to celebrate this momentous occasion. I'm like, you totally made this possible because I was struggling. And so we had a drink. We connected on Instagram. We started chatting like randomly. Like I was not looking. I was very clear. Actually, I was like coming out of this relationship that I just barely got out of. I was like, listen, I know what I don't want. And I will tell you, like, if you ever swear at me, I'm done faster than you can finish that swear word. Like, these are my boundaries. And I was like, I don't even care. Because at that point, I wasn't going to tolerate anything that wasn't like exactly what was on my list. And I could recognize what was on my list because I had this list, right? I had this clarity. And so when I went on dates on Tinder, it was very obvious. I'm like, oh, that was not it. They said something a little bit racist. Okay, definitely not it. Like, I just was like, I'm not going to tolerate anything. Because at that point I thought I'll much rather be, single mom and focus on my kids. And that's where I really wanted to focus on than have to care for another grown human being. Like, no, thank you. So if this is ever going to happen, it's going to have to be someone who's going to come in and make my life infinitely better, who's going to answer all of those prayers that I put in that list. And it turns out that he was. And it also turned out that when we held hands for the first time, I nearly melted into a puddle in like the best way. And that I just felt like this weird sense, like almost like we had known each other before. Like I felt so safe and also so excited. Like it was like butterflies and peace at the same time, which is a weird feeling that I had never felt ever before. And I will just tell you, maybe TMI, cover your ears if you're not into sensitive subjects, but the sex is like a spiritual experience when you're with someone who you're so connected with, right? When you really truly have that deep connection where you're both whole people, right? You're coming together, not trying to change the other person. And that's what happens when you settle for someone else and you want to change them, right? Because they're not actually what you wanted. But you come in and say like, hey, look at this awesome person. Like, they're not perfect because they're human. And so am I. And if they accept my flaws and I accept their flaws, like, I'll tell you what, it is so freeing. So, I talk a lot about relationships because I have learned so much from the contrast between my previous 3 relationships. The first one, my husband actually came out as gay. I have a whole podcast episode on that on my show if you want to hear that story. And then there was another relationship in between, a couple of years. We got engaged. It was terrible. I don't know what I was doing. We split up, did not get married. And then my other marriage where I was with him for 13 years. And I have a lot of not great experience in relationship. But if someone ever asked me, like, would you go back and do it differently? I absolutely the fuck would not. Because I would not be who I am today. I would not have the knowledge, and not only knowledge, but like embodied wisdom, experiential knowledge turned into wisdom that instead of beating myself up for, I'm taking forward and choosing differently and moving differently and creating differently. And I want to show as many people as possible how they can do that for themselves, how they can create the happy, healthy, loving relationships that like truly light their soul on fire, because every single human deserves that.
Again, I feel like we are leading the same life. Like your story, not the marathon. My husband would never. He did when I was training, because that's when I would train. He did come and work out with me and get trained in my classes. However, there's no way that he would ever run a marathon. But the whole hand holding sparked, like It's like I can't even explain it. It is the weirdest sensation and feeling that takes over your whole body. So
Yeah.
I absolutely know what you're saying.
Like I felt it in my toes and I felt it in my everywhere.
Yes. And we still have that. It's like my favorite thing because we're like, how is this even possible? It feels like home. It's the wildest sensation. But yes, I absolutely know what you're saying.
Like a lot of people think, and I did a podcast episode on this too, because a lot of people think that like you can't have the passion and the commitment, like that the passion is like meant to die out over time. And I call bullshit on that because you can experience multiple things at once, right? You are complex. What you believe to be true is true for you. And so if you believe that the spark can't last, well,
guess what?
Surprise, you'll have exactly what you think, right? And I know that's so frustrating to hear because we don't want to take responsibility for the shit that's not going well in our life. Like nobody does. But if you want to change it, it's the only way. The first step really is getting clarity on what it is that you want to feel and really truly, visualize that, imagine it, feel it for yourself so that you are so familiar with that feeling that when that or something better, like the melting into a puddle, comes along, you're just like, oh shit, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Oh my God. And then you don't jump in all the way 2 feet right off the bat either. Right? You make sure you take a little bit of time to observe because lots of people can put on a show at first. They can say a lot of things and their actions don't always match. So be watching for those actions to match. And you can create what seems like a paradox of passion and commitment and, that safety and also the butterflies at the same time. Anything is possible. You set your mind to it.
Real quick, just wrapping up. I would like to know how you create this in your daily life. It's one thing to hear the concepts. It's one thing to practice it with broad strokes, but then in your daily life, how do you show up with this mindset, this perspective of happiness and put it into practice?
It gets easier because, like I say, when you unlearn the stuff that is not it makes space for you to just simply live in your intended state, which doesn't require so much efforting and so much work. So it's a process of unlearning. It's a process of stripping away that which does not serve you. It's a process of, and I have my own methodology. It's called the CREATE method. And the C in the CREATE is an acronym, of course, because I like words and I like to have fun with that. The C is about calibrating your consciousness. And when it comes to creating this, I don't think there's like a one size fits all solution. That's why I have a 6-letter acronym. So calibrating your consciousness is really bringing your ideas, your thoughts, your beliefs, your mindsets, the way that you see the world, working on your awareness, just shifting things so that you can see things from a different perspective. And that is a huge piece of it, not the only piece. So the R is about refining your routine. This is about taking those daily actions that set you up for success. I like to joke that I have an amazing 3-step morning routine that just like sets my day on fire. And it is my morning meditation, which I do before I get out of bed, a coffee, cheers, and a good poop. I mean, you really can't start a day better than that. So that is about setting your day off on the right steps. And that's going to look different for everyone. So again, this isn't like my solution. It's you figuring out your way of how can you prioritize yourself and how can you first meet your own needs so that you can go through your day with the intention of creating the happiness that you desire, creating the love that you desire. E is about elevating your energy. This encompasses my background as a fitness and nutrition coach, bringing in taking care of your meat suit, hydration, sleep, all very important. The A is about activating your aligned life. This is really getting that clarity. What is for you? What isn't for you? Where do you end and where do other people begin? Because knowing yourself this intimately is what allows you to create without the burden of other people. And it allows you to actually recognize and choose the things that are for you that feel really good. The T is about tuning into your true vision. This is honestly allowing yourself to dream a little bit bigger, maybe than you ever have before, because you start to see things from a different perspective and you see more and more possibility and opportunity. And then the second E is about empowering your elevated self. And this is truly about embodiment. This is about taking all of these pieces and embodying them, not just learning for knowledge, which is why people don't get the results they like take in knowledge. They know, the people, we know in general, like if I want to lose weight, I should move my body more and be aware of what I'm eating. We know this. It's easier to know it than to do it. And so this embodiment piece means taking that knowledge and making it experiential so that you're actually walking in that wisdom, taking that information and using it to create the life that you truly want. And so that is my step. It's not linear. It's not a 6-step A to Z process by any stretch. It is a meet you right where you're at. Recognize that you are a whole human and start devising and planning your path, right? Helping you to find and unlock the truths within you so that you can use those to find your way.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Thank you, Christy, for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your happiness with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to share some of my story. Try something new on today. Try on a slightly new perspective. Give it a go. Twirl around, see how it fits, see how it feels, and go out there and make your life really epic.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.